less about what they say and more about what they've done. So I think the important thing for me as a citizen is like proof points.
And I think it's really a matter of what these guys really want to do and the real changes that need to be made.
We're looking for honesty and integrity, especially the ministers that are going to be running that party. Also, the security of women and children, their safety.
It's difficult to listen to the manifestos because they never really live up to their promises.
I do look at what a political party has to offer. I look at what the political party's ideology is. Some I can never vote for.
Question: do election manifestos matter? It's topical, and it starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Well, it is that time, 'tis the season, one would say, the local government elections. It's just around 3 months away, almost to the date. And as you can expect, the political machinery is shifting into high gear, top gear. Parties and independent candidates are hitting the campaign trail with manifesto launches set to come in thick and fast. The rallies will get bigger, the promises will get bolder, and the competition for your vote will get hotter. Let's get this party started. Over 600 registered political parties. Gives that phrase a whole new meaning, right? So voters could be forgiven for thinking they're spoiled for choice. But here's the rub. Does having more parties and more independents on the ballot necessarily mean voters have more meaningful choices? And then there are the manifestos, the policies, the promises, the priorities, the plans. But how much stock do you really put in them? Do voters read the fine print or simply look at the headline? Are policies, the values, and the concrete plans to fix what's broken really driving the debate? And those packed stadiums and manifesto launches, are they votes in the bank or just crowds in the stands? Because a full stadium makes for great television. But does it translate into a full ballot box? Tonight, we'll pull back the curtain, take the political temperature, so to speak, and try to separate the promises from the politics. It brings us to the question of the week, and we ask you, do you read election manifestos before voting? Or does your experience in community matter more? We're eager to get in touch with you, or you get in touch with us in terms of your comments on Facebook, SABC News. We're also opening up the lines tonight, 011-714-0677-7879, 011-714-0677-7879. That's the number on your screen. We'll put it up during the course of tonight's show. We'll take your calls at around 7:30. So stick around. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Perspective coming up. Let's go to the Better Minds now. And we have in studio with us Lulu White, founder of EMCA, thought leader on elections, democracy and governance in Africa. Thank you very much indeed, Lulu, for joining us. As well as Angelo Fick, Director of Research, Auwal Socioeconomic Research Institute. Sir, always a pleasure having your Better Mind. That number again, 011-714-0677-7879. We'll take your calls at around 7:30, but please get dialing. I guess the simple question, Lulu, would be, do manifestos matter in this day and age?
I think they do matter. However, my biggest takeaway from a manifesto is that it's not a legal contract. I think it matters in a sense of just political speak. As you put it earlier on when you said it's bold promises, it's nothing but a bunch of promises that voters are not able to hold anybody accountable for. And I think while they matter because they sort of set the pace for the voter to understand who and what they're voting for, you can't really use them as a social contract between the voter and the party that they're voting for.
Yeah. I wonder, you know, in terms, if you put it on a linear scale, in terms of the manifestos, from the practical to the downright ridiculous, where do you see the manifestos in this day and age playing?
So I think it's important for people to take what some of the people that you vox popped earlier in that insert spoke about, their experience and their judgment of what political parties have done, and to see what in these manifestos bear that out. And then democracy is not a once-off, you go and vote once every 5 years. Once you then have the ongoing processes of community policing forums, various ward committees, that's where you then take, if this person won the ward on this particular party's behalf, and this was in the manifesto, you then, as an active citizen, participate in those meetings and say to somebody, well, you promised that you were going to have more of this in this ward. How are you going about doing this? And so I think manifestos may be long and they may be utopian documents that promise all sorts of things, but they're important to hold elected representatives to account, to say, you promised this, what are you doing? And then I think lastly, it becomes what I judge people on as a voter. All of us should be, by going, you've promised this and you haven't delivered it, so I can't vote for you again. And I think one of your respondents actually said something like that. He looks at the manifestos to decide who he also cannot vote for.
Right. Lulu, there's also the feel factor as well, because voters don't tend to vote on policy alone.
Yes.
There's the feel, whether I can feel I can trust you to deliver. Of course, read the manifestos, you'll get the door knock soon, you can question them one-on-one. But what do you make of that as part of the calculus?
I think South African politics actually, in my point of view, are not, well, fail in that regard. I think that's a better word. South African politics are really driven by popularity, and that is where the feel factor comes in. People vote for people based on how they feel about them, whether they like them, whether they don't like them. And I suppose that's across the board. You do business with people that you like, as opposed to people that you can get used to. So I think this is where the politics of South Africa fail, because often, over and over again, you see people voting for the same party over and over again because they like the political party, they like the history that comes from that political party, and the promises that political party makes seem like they're doable, they're capable of doing them, despite the experiences that they may have had with that political party. However, in the last election, I think in the 2024 election, I noticed a trend where voting started becoming more issue-based as opposed to just now about feeling. People started wanting to know, if I give you my vote, what am I going to get from this particular vote? How do I hold you accountable? How do I make sure that you are able to deliver that which you have promised? And it would be interesting to see how that would go within this year, whether it's people are still going to go on feeling or people are going to be a bit more issue-based.
Angelo, just want to have a look. Control, if you could put up the graphic with regards to the voter turnout since democracy and the split between national and local government elections. And you see in the 90s it was high up, as you can expect in terms of the national. 58 in the 90s in terms of turnout, right? And then you go down the line. Let's look at local government. If you go to 2000, it drops to 48, 2006, 48.3, it rises to about 57.6 in 2011, and then slightly up in 2016, and then this fall. I wonder, and just for viewers to know, voter turnout is calculated after the elections. There's the mathematical calculation in terms of that. What's your read in terms of turnout versus how many people actually registered? And does national or local government need a different playbook in terms of encouraging voters than national?
So I think if you look at that graph, you'll also see that the better years coincided with Mr. Zuma's presidency. So a crisis-ridden country in all sorts of ways at local level sees more people turning out. The 2021 issue may be as a result of the pandemic. We just come out, so there would be that kind of turnout issue. But the irony is that the issues that matter to us most are very local, and we turn out less for that. And partly that is because of the spectacle of national elections aren't present at local government elections. But I do think it is important to also place this in a context. This is a country in which literacy is a real issue. So 8 out of 10 10-year-olds for a very long time have not been able to read for meaning in any language. Can you have meaningful political engagement around local issues and understanding of the electoral system and understanding of the political system formalized if people suffer this issue. And then increasingly there has been, shall we say, disinterest or alienation of younger people from the systems. And I think partly the politicians that governed the post-apartheid polity had to take some responsibility for this, because we now live in a country that, to a large extent, we have made. We've inherited issues from before 94, but we've built this country over the last 32 years. And those young people feeling disaffected, feeling alienated, not wanting to participate, who are now increasingly the majority of the electorate, are people who have to be brought up back into the system, because the country is going to be made for their futures. And if they're not participating, they're going to inherit an even worse situation than if they intervened. And so I think participation at the local government elections really should be higher, but, you know, counterfactually it isn't. It's lower where the issues matter most.
Until we're getting the caller second fast, let's go to the lines before you get your comment on that, Lulu. Sharis is calling us from Westbury in Gauteng. Sharis, a very good evening to you. What's your question for our guest?
Good evening. I'm not calling from Westbury. I'm actually calling from Eldorado Park.
Oh, welcome.
No problem. It's not so much a question as what it is a statement with regards to what it is that we are currently dealing with when it comes to the local elections. And I think that the biggest challenge that any politician at this point will have is being on the ground and actually doing what is required of them. You know, it's that final push, that final getting to the goalpost kind of thing. And ultimately, what we need to know from politicians is, you know, your manifesto says one thing, and for the last 5 years, we've seen what local elections or local government elections have done and haven't done. So ultimately, we need to understand exactly what it is that the people on the ground are feeling. And when it comes to a community such as mine, you know, we are feeling very disenfranchised. We are feeling all sorts of things when it comes to the fact that we still have young people dying on the streets of our communities. We still have issues with regards to service delivery. We still have people coming in and telling us that they're going to fix our education system. And ultimately, the biggest challenge is we've had these problems and issues for many, many years. But right now, no one is even tackling any of that. Everybody's staying away from those hard questions and those hard situations. And I just think that right now we need to get to a point where we are voting for people who have actually changed the narrative, who have changed what our communities look like. And unfortunately, for the last 20 years, no one has ever bothered to do any of that. There hasn't been a change. Things have actually gotten progressively worse. And I think right now we're sitting at a point where it's entirely a case of people saying to us, vote for me because I will. But what have you done in the past and what have you changed about the circumstances and the situation that our communities find themselves in?
So track record is important to you, Sharis. Just before I let you go, the approach and how the politicians or the independents communicate their message to you, how would you like those answers? On stadiums, a door knock, social media, how are you engaging?
Well, you know what? It's all good and well if they're going to be in stadiums because that costs money, and if they're going to be coming to my door, what have they actually done? What actual change, tangible change, have they brought about to a community like Eldorado Park, like Westbury, like the Cape Flats? What have they done with regards to actually addressing the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis? And I think that is the one thing that will impact or sway my vote. I have a political party that I belong to, but I think that on the larger scale of things, it's about what you have done, where have you been, and have I seen you actually affecting change in my community, and not about the smoke screens and all the dazzles and all the beautiful, wonderful things that you are promising us in your manifesto. It must be what you have actually tangibly changed and how you have supported the community that you now want their votes from.
Sharis, appreciate your call there, Sharis from Eldorado Park. Let's go to Kanisa, calling us from the mother city, Cape Town. Kanisa, do you read manifestos?
Yes, I do.
And do you find it an effective way to communicate the message?
It's not really an effective way of communicating the message, especially for me, for someone that works with young people, because whatever that is spoken or whatever that is stated on the manifestos does not really speak to the reality that we live in, because we don't see those things actually taking place.
Right. Kanisa, thank you very much indeed for your call. 011-714-0677-7879. We'll be taking more of your calls in a short while. We need to take a quick break. More with our guests next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Have you registered to vote? Just remember the online voter registration portal remains active, allowing voters to register and update their details according to, to avoid missing out on this important occasion, right? The portal register to vote.elections.org.za will remain open until the election is proclaimed. So if you haven't done it yet, please go on and register. We understand that the date will be proclaimed on Friday, and then you have until midnight till things close. Now, on our regular Word on the Street feature, we took to various streets of South Africa seeking diverse insights and perspectives on this topic, and this is what you had to say. Take a look.
I do look at what a political party has to offer. I look at what the political party's ideology is. Some I can never vote for. Unfortunately, the liberation parties have not performed very well in terms of meeting the commitments that they made to our people. So it's going to be a tough choice for me. I don't know how I'm going to vote. But for my local politician, I guess I'm interested in the person that's there as well.
I support the manifestos of local municipalities and governments, to some extent. Being in a private service and all of those things, I always make sure that they are backing up and supporting business growth, especially for the private services, providing private partnerships and also looking at economic stability as well. So from my side, I also look at parties' track record, which is very important, and whether they are able to deliver or not.
The main issue that I have is that it's less about what they say and more about what they've done. So I think the important thing for me as a citizen is like proof points. I feel like every time an election rolls around, everyone's making promises, but most of them don't carry through on that. So I want to know what they've done and how can I be guaranteed that they're going to do what they say they're going to do.
We're looking for honesty and integrity, especially the ministers that are going to be running that party. Also, the security of women and children, their safety. And most importantly is that in our country we've been going through a lot of turmoil for the last 30 years. And a woman has not been seen as a priority in this country. And that's what we should be, a priority.
For the most part, I think I base my decision not on the manifesto, because that's mostly just for aesthetics, but and for, I think, pleasing the crowd, although it is something influential for people, but it's bigger than that. I think it's really a matter of what these guys really want to do and the real changes that need to be made.
It's difficult to listen to the manifestos because they never really live up to their promises. So it puts you in a tricky situation. But in most cases, I do listen to them, and they do in some sense influence, but we need to see what's going to happen. And if they do live up to the promises, then I'll definitely influence my voting.
We really appreciate your thoughts on this important topic. Lulu, let me bring you in with regards to the strategy. And you have competing with social media, you've got political influences, you've got election fatigue for voters' attention. I wonder, what does the modern voter election strategy actually look like?
I think in this day and age, it would be foolhardy for any political party to not actually take into account the impact of social media. And it was interesting in the incept that we just watched right now that there was only one person that I would regard as a young person that was asked the question whether they actually read. And his response was that he listens to them, meaning that for him, reading is not something that he's interested in. You are correct, there's election fatigue, they're tired of hearing promises, and really young people don't have the time for that. They want to keep things moving. So the best way to be able to reach out to young people is actually to have a strategy that encompasses employing social media influencers that would be able to decipher the manifestos as they were. I mean, I'm not promoting anybody, but I'm just saying, for example, a lot of young people listen to somebody like Jax, who would then go on and look at what the manifesto is, and they would break it down, and they would make young people understand this is the reason why you should possibly vote for that political party or not vote for that political party. So I think it would be very foolish for any political party in this day and age to not actually have platforms that directly speak to young people, such as Twitter, such as TikTok and Facebook, to a certain extent. As far as reading, young people really do not have the energy and the time to be able to do that.
In terms of strategy, Angela, is it the message or the communication of the message that's lacking?
Well, I don't think there's a lack. I think that there is a different set of engagements going on. In terms of political manifestos, there have really only been two parties who've had the ability to implement their manifestos by governing, in particular, municipalities. So it is unfair on those parties that have issued manifestos to say, well, they haven't lived up to it. Well, they haven't had a chance to do so. So I think it's important for all of us to also realize we're in a different era now. We're in an era no longer dominated by one party after the 2024 election, and we've been in coalition government, in local government for at least 10 years, but certainly in a lot of spaces over the last 5. So what we're going to have to do is look at those manifestos to see not just in terms of how they're communicated to us, but if there is going to be coalition government, what are these people coalitioning on? Because if one person is promising local economic growth of a certain kind at this particular municipality, but the other person is suggesting that they want to have foreign direct investment, and those two things don't necessarily match, and the one may not be possible, it's also important to see what is being promised in the election manifesto and what is realizable. And there, a certain kind of savvy has to come in, so that you're not looking for education improvement from local governors, and you're not looking for community safety issues beyond local government intervention. So I think it is important for all of us to start informing ourselves, not just of what our own issues are, but where we take those issues, and is this the election in which those issues are going to be on the table? And that, I think, requires some amount of reading, some amount of engagement, and then also some amount of belonging. Because at the moment we're talking as if all of us sit outside of political parties. No, millions of South Africans sit inside political parties, many more sit inside civil society organizations, whether they're churches, masjids, temples, football clubs. In those spaces, what are the priorities that are not individual consumer priorities, but community priorities? Because it's one thing to say I sit in a community and things are going wrong. The question is, what organizations in that community are active, and how do you then get them to engage with the political space? And that's the role of civil society, right? So people think of civil society as NGOs. They're actually just, the spaces that most people belong in and to in their everyday life. And there, I think, some kind of engagement with manifestos is going to be crucial, because it's in conversing with one another on buses, on taxis, at stops, at drinking halls, if that's where you do go, that you start realizing, oh, I thought these people promised this, but actually they didn't. And that, I think, is what a healthy democracy also requires.
Are you also getting a sense that promises are aligned to the proximity to power, meaning further away you get political parties or independents get from power, the more unrealistic these promises become?
To a certain extent. So there are people promising all sorts of things that they will have no power to implement, even if they win, the majority of the votes, because there are constitutional breaks on what it is that you can do in South Africa. So I think we also need to begin to be realistic about when people make promises that they're going to I mean, there was a political party, this is not a local government election issue, that a few years ago said they would bring back the death penalty. They were such a small minority party that they never had to address that you would need a 2/3 majority in Parliament. There would be all sorts of things. The attendance at Parliament would have to be high. For that, it would have to go through both houses of Parliament. So those kinds of promises that speak to our fears and exploit them offer solutions that are not implementable. And in a country that's currently undergoing a crisis around belonging, there will be all sorts of political actors who will say, we will do the following things for you. When actually there will be a legal system, there will be all sorts of things that prevent them from doing it. And we need to be clear that solutions have to be realistically based. And there again, we need to belong in spaces and have conversations with one another so that our choices at political level when we vote are not just informed by me reading a manifesto or me hearing a politician. I've spoken to people, I've gotten my misperceptions fixed, I've gotten new sets of information, and that's the nature of politics. It isn't you go into a supermarket and buy a product. It is you live in a community, you have to talk to the people around you, and together you may vote for different parties, but you have had engagements around this that have been productive to sway one another.
If you are selling your product, so to speak, 620 political parties registered, how on earth do you stand out? How on earth do manifestos stand out?
Look, I think the biggest thing is that you have to be a political party that's already been on the ground. And that's the reality. And as Andrea has rightly put it, those political parties that can actually claim that space, is only two of those in South Africa. So I think as political parties, they need to be very creative about it. But I think here's another thing that people seem to forget about local government, and which is quite disappointing that you actually have such low numbers of participation, is that you actually don't even need to vote for a political party. You can actually have a community leader, somebody who's active, somebody who moves and understands the challenges of that particular community, and that person can be backed by the community so that they actually participate in the election as independents. But here's also another thing that people seem to also forget. There are two election processes. I understand that there's a local government election process that takes place where you vote for your councillors and the like, but there's also ward committee elections that take place after these elections, and that is where there seems to be a disconnect between the community and the persons that they vote for, because essentially what the ward committee members are supposed to do is to drive the agenda behind the ward councillor, to say, remember, this is what we promised the people, this is what we said we will put in place. These ward committee members are the ones that are supposed to assist the community to understand the IDP. They are supposed to assist and these people get stipends, by the way, from the municipality. They're supposed to be the ones that actually assist municipalities or those councillors that get elected to be able to keep tabs of what was promised by the community to the community and whether that is being delivered. If it is not being delivered, there needs to be communication, social engagements to say why is this ward councillor not coming through with the water that he had promised. There needs to be some sort of connection that takes place there. Currently that's not happening. People just focus on the election. Once the election is over, they sit and they say, now let's see if he's going to deliver. Whereas democracy is actually an ongoing process. It's not just a once-off process.
011-714-0677-7879. That is the number to dial. Please share your views with us. We're also on Facebook. We're going to take much more of your calls in a short while. 011-714-0677-7879. So we have from Limpopo, Reverend Dr. Randacheni. Rev, a very good afternoon to you, very good evening to you. What's on your mind, your questions for our guests?
Good evening. Thank you so much. You see, this issue of manifestos is very problematic sometimes, because what I have realized is that many people inherit their political choices from their parents, grandparents, or relatives, because some of them, they grow up hearing that one particular party has always represented the family, and therefore they continue supporting it without questioning its current policies. In other words, they trust the political wisdom of older family members, and they fear disappointing their parents or elders. Sometimes family discussions rarely encourage independent political thinking, and where you realize that political loyalty becomes part of family identity. when children grow in such families, they often imitate what they observe rather than investigate for themselves. And in terms of community loyalty and social pressure, I realize that in many communities in our area, political support is collective because people vote according to what their neighbors or friends or church members or local leaders support.
Yeah.
Some of the people fear of being criticized or isolated or desire to maintain community unity. You realize that belief that community interests are protected by one particular party, and the influence of respected community members is there.
Right. Reverend, thank you very much indeed. I'll put that to our guests in a short while in terms of the family unit and the community, whether this still holds sway over youngsters in terms of historical voting patterns. Reverend, thank you very much indeed. We have Sipo, I understand. Tsepo. Tsepo is calling us from Mpumalanga. Tsepo, a very good evening to you.
Good evening, Herman. Good evening to your viewers as well.
Your questions for our guests?
Yeah, mine. I have a question and a statement to make. Firstly, to our guests, is that is the manifesto still relevant for the core voters currently? Because as I've seen it, it has turned into an academic discussion because most of the voters, especially in the lower level of our communities, some of them cannot read and write. Some of them, they have not even read the entire booklet of those manifestos or even had the chance to listen to those people or politicians as they speak. But in my view, how I see the manifestos, I see manifestos more like political promises, more like love letters written by a serial cheater claiming that he or she can be loyal. So how I view that from going forward, how can things be made? I want to agree with your sister there that in future, the better way to engage with voters is not only during election campaigns, but also during those non-election periods. What they have to do, political parties and people that have interest in being elected, is that they need to fully engage, actively engage with communities and residents, especially address their concerns regularly, link them with relevant stakeholders, because they know what people need. They live in those communities. They know we have water shortages, we have unemployment issues, and we have poor road infrastructures. But what I then say, engage them even during those election period. But to address what she said, that there's even a space for independent candidates, especially those ones who are active in committees. But it's not easy for someone to be like, let me go and be an independent candidate, especially if you want to serve the community, because of the current killings that are currently happening within our political structures. Right. You see. Yeah, that's basically my submission.
Sepo, appreciate your comments. Thank you so much. We'll put it to our guests in the short while. Let's get Zita from Giani. Zita, a very good evening to you.
Evening.
Oops, did we lose Zita? All right, we'll try.
Yes,
hopefully. Zita's still there. Go ahead, Zita.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Blaine. I've seen 600 political parties which have registered to vote, and the manifestos, normally it's 15 to 18 points. You may find that only 9 points are the same from all these political parties. But the question is, after these people, they've been appointed, there's a distance or a laguna gap in between. You may only find that the honorable, which is a councillor, now is not attached to the community where you have been elected to. I've realized and I've seen it, and I'm the victim of the circumstances. After they've elected, they relocate, go to the urban area. From there, you happen to have to set an appointment to see the community ward councillor. You have to set an appointment to see the mayor. You have to set an appointment to see the president. But now there's a door-to-door campaign. All those people, they've come down to the squatter camps, to the villages. They interact with the community members. Now they've been elected. There's a scarcity of money to provide roads, scarcity of money to provide education, food and transport. Now, we have to ask ourselves, the promise they've made before, after they've been elected, where are they going to get money? And if there is money, are they not be able enough to channel the money to the right cause? Because when they came for an IDP, we register all the grievances or the request which we need a certain political party to deliver.
Right.
After they've been in municipality, they will say this one will they have to defer it for other financial year up until 5 years elapses. So that's the problem now.
Yeah.
There's a distance which they are keeping.
Zita, thank you very much indeed. Zita is calling us from Gani. We'll try to get some answers for you from our guests in a short while. 011-714-0677-7879. We're going to take a quick break. More next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Election manifestos, do they matter? Let us know on our Facebook page. 011-714-0677-7879 is the number to dial. We had a number of callers before we went to break, Angelo. One of them was the good Reverend talking about the family unit and the influence that the family or the older generation have on youngsters. I wonder if that is still a thing or a trend, whereby youngsters, look, they're influenced by multiple sources, right? Whether you're school or university, etc. But how valuable is that contribution or that influence from the community?
So I think the family remains the primary site of socialization for the majority of people in this country. But it's interesting that this was somebody who was calling from Limpopo, right? So there's this massive rural space, small villages, smaller towns. But for the first time in history over the last decade, we've seen the majority of South Africans now live in towns and cities. So I think that that's less likely to happen in the urban spaces where people have urbanized, moved away from primary families and live in new kinds of arrangements. So I think that may still be the case for many South Africans who live in smaller communities and in closer networks. But for people who've moved for economic reasons, to get jobs, to go to university, the control of the parents over the vote, remember, my vote is my secret, people may behave as if they're voting in a particular way, but they may not be voting that way. And then the other thing to remember is how very few of these young people actually do participate. And that's a real, future risk for the country, because if they are the majority of the future, who are the adults who are going to have to run the society, take decisions in the society, and it behoves political parties to try and get them back on board, and for people to join these political parties and to also change them from within. There are 600 of them. You can join one of any of those 600.
The category, Lulu, of 18 and 19-year-olds become very important, right? I wonder if they are targeted enough in terms of getting their attention and getting them excited about voting.
I don't think they are targeted enough, certainly not by political parties. I think the IEC obviously would run their campaigns as far as ensuring that there's voter education and people, that information reaches them. But I think political parties are aware that these 18-year-olds, 19 and 20-year-olds are the guys that are actually not going to vote according to legacy. They're not people that are interested in voting for a political party my grandmother voted for because they freed the country. So I think for most political parties it becomes ignorance is bliss. The less they're interested, the more they're uninterested in voting, the more chances they continue to have older people continuing to vote for them. So I think there's not a lot of passion, particularly from political parties, to actually make sure that those guys are engaged, because once they vote, they are going to vote for different political parties, I think.
Mutsabi is calling us from the Northern Cape. Mutsabi, a very good evening to you. What's on your mind? What's your question for our guest?
My question to the guest is, do you think perhaps manifesto, is there a better way for political parties to attract young people to reading manifestos? Because personally, I think that manifestos are important when it comes to national elections, but I think when it comes down to local government elections, manifestos are important, but we are voting for people that we know. So manifestos, then we take a back step. We then vote for people that we know, and then the organizations later.
Right. How would you better like the manifestos being communicated to you? In what medium would you like to see these manifestos communicated to communities?
I think for now, because the target is young people who are not registering to vote, who are not voting, is maybe your podcasts, your influences. We need the political parties or even IEC to start targeting young people in platforms where they listen to or they watch.
Yeah.
So, like one of the guests said, Jax is also important on TikTok. Young people are on TikTok a lot. So perhaps that's how we can reach young people and get those manifestos to them.
Motsabi from the Northern Cape, thank you so much indeed. What do you make of that, Angelo?
Well, I think people have conflated, we all tend to, the manifesto with the thick book that says these are the 500 pages of things we're doing. A manifesto is just a declaration of should we get into power, this is what we want to do. And that, I think, remains important because it allows one to make decisions. And that doesn't have to be a 500-page document. That can be 18 bullet points that says, if we get in, this is what we want to do. And that remains crucial. How you communicate that is very differently done. And then I think the individual councillors who stand as ward councillors have to articulate their vision in relation to the party they belong to if they're not independents, so that they can't promise one set of things, the party is promising something else. And then thirdly, I think we must not forget that while you are voting for an individual ward councillor, you're also casting a proportional representation ballot. So you are voting for a party if you cast that ballot. And therefore you do need to know what that party intends to do and whether or not that speaks to what you want at the community level. So connecting your community with the town or city or local government structure that you live inside, whether it's a local municipality or not, linking that to your own demands as a community, not as an individual, to what you want from the electoral system. And then, as Lulu's pointed out, continuing to participate in the very many processes that follow the election to make sure that this happens. And that includes the block committees and ward committees, but they also include community policing forum. They include constituency period. Are you contacting the person who was elected as ward councillor, who now represents all of us, not just those who voted for him or her? And that understanding that it is an ongoing process is going to be crucial if we're going to change the way in which politics happens, that it isn't you vote for these people and 5 years later you say to them, you didn't do what we wanted you to do. And at some level communities are really not doing that. They're protesting, they're writing letters, they're going, they're arguing. But we need to make that less of a spectacle where we protest and more of participation. And I think it has served political parties not for that to happen, but to draw those young people back in. I think a sense of belonging, a sense of participation is crucial, because this is also a generation that's deeply atomized, that they're very individualistic, they've been socialized to be individualistic, their entertainment and amusement comes to them at the end of their arms, and some of that needs to be re-socialized because it's all of us together or none of us at all. And this idea that you can engage with politics at the end of your arm is not necessarily productive. What you do need is belonging, participation with real life interactions to also temper, ameliorate some of your internal voices so that you're in a community that is a community of physical beings rather than just a community of the imagination that you engage with via electronic media. And I think for rural people in rural spaces, it's easier to have that physical interaction. In our larger cities, that's much more difficult, and people have connections that are not next to them in physical proximity, and there are more and more influences people on these platforms who are imaginary beings. They may be real people who do go shopping, but my relationship with them is they're on my phone. They're not my friend who's sitting next to me and says, what you're saying is not making sense.
Zita from Gianni raised an interesting point in terms of the disappearance or the lack of politicians in the area post the elections. I wonder how much that is contributing to this voter apathy, where people say, well, you don't care about us, why should I even bother?
It is a big contributor because it means that people do not trust the people that actually get into office, but it's obviously not the only contributor. The biggest contributor comes to the fact that people are able to say, you came to us, and this was the social contract you had with us. You promised us A, B, C, and D, and you did not deliver on that. Why then should we give you our vote once again? Voter apathy has a lot there's a lot of factors that actually contribute to it. So councillor leaving is certainly not just one. And there are ways that communities have engaged and used in the past to be able to get their councillors back in, there's these community meetings that they would call, where they would have the whole committee or all councillors there in that particular space to come and give account as to why, what has happened to the things that they wanted. So while it does contribute, it's not the biggest contributor. The biggest contributor is voter satisfaction. Yeah. When you came to us and said you would do A, B, C, D, have you been able to achieve those things? If not, why have you not achieved it? And why should we vote for you again? Because clearly we no longer trust you as the community.
We just got a minute, Angelo. There's a big difference between apathy and making a conscious decision not to vote, right?
Absolutely, and there will be those people who have decided that the system does not work. They have their life experience to work with it. But to many of those who are apathetic and moving in that direction, I would argue we would not be where we are today. I know we focus on the negative, but so much of the journey, to use that metaphor, that we've travelled since 1994 is precisely because of politics. The transformations we've seen in South Africa have been radical. They've not been enough. But the country of 1993 is not the country of 2026. The local governments of 1998 are not the local government spaces of 2026. Inadequate change, not enough positive, but we cannot say that it's only been negative. And that, I think, is a reason to get people to participate and to wrestle the system back from organizations or individuals or people or corporations that may not have their interest at heart, and say, this is our politics, we will take it back for ourselves.
Yeah. It's a good, important point to leave it on. Angelo Fick, thank you very much indeed. Lulu White, appreciate your better mind as well on this topic. All right, before we go, here's my take. And for, close to 5 years now, you've heard me on this show talking about getting to that better place, right? And what I mean about that is simply progress, hope. But hope with its sleeves rolled up, right? Because let's be honest, hope without action is just wishful thinking. Yes, I hear the skepticism. I hear your frustrations. I understand it. And no, we shouldn't swallow every political promise hook, line, and sinker. But why vote if you're giving up on the possibility of better? We exercise the franchise because we believe tomorrow can be better than today. Or we vote to keep things the way they are. Manifestos tell us what people say they intend to do. The real question is, who has the urgency and the integrity to actually do it? I'll leave you with that question, and that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of Topical on YouTube as well as SABC+. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.